I'm Kamika Dillard, certified ACC professional coach and CEO of Fail Forward Coaching. At Fail Forward Coaching, professional growth isn't one size fits all. That's why we've created 3 ways to support you. DOT for building clarity and direction, RISE for resilience and intentional action, and VISION for long-term strategy and leadership. Each program is designed to help you move through setbacks with confidence and clarity and create momentum that lasts. No pressure, no hustle, just real progress. Ready to explore what's possible? Book a free discovery call at failforwardcoaching.com. Welcome to the Black Women S.A.V.E. Black Women podcast, the podcast where we support, amplify, validate, and elevate Black women always. I'm your host, Kamika Dillard, and this is our sanctuary, a space built on the belief that when Black women show up for each other, we don't just survive, we save. This is more than a podcast, it's a movement, so let's get into it. So for this week's Fail Forward File, let's talk about big picture, vibes, and no systems. I had a vision. I always have visions. I'm a visionary. Okay, I always have ideas. Okay, I have momentum. But what I found myself not having enough of, especially as I am trying to stand up another another line of business, is enough structure to hold my vision, my ideas, and my momentum together. I found myself trying to set up everything at once, new systems, new channels, new tools, because I thought that's what doing it right looked like. And the truth is, I was building from vibes instead of sequencing. I wasn't prioritizing what exactly needed to be built first. This got especially real because I'm not managing one thing now. I'm managing 4 businesses and brands at the same time. And instead of slowing down and asking, what does this business need right now? I was asking, how do I get everything set up as fast as possible? I say all the time, I am an Aries sun, Sagittarius moon, and a Virgo rising, and that Virgo rising kicks my butt more than anything. That is how disorganization sneaks in. Not because you're careless, but because you are ambitious without a container. What I learned the hard way is that you don't have to do everything at once to be legitimate. You don't have to have every system to start sustaining growth. And more tools does not equal more clarity. I talk about clarity a lot, y'all. Trying to implement too much too soon actually creates friction. I spent more time managing systems than managing the business. I was busy, but not always effective. Growth without structure doesn't scale. It collapses. And that's what I found myself in, a little bit of a mini collapse. So take what I'm telling you guys, especially because we are in this entrepreneur series. Like, don't try to do too much too soon. A little bit at a time, slow and steady wins the race. And that is this week's Fail Forward File. All right, y'all. So we have back in the sanctuary AnGèle Cade. And just so I can remind you guys of how bad of a girl she is, she's that girl. She is a consulting expert with over 20 years of experience helping entrepreneurs build strong, compliant corporate structures. She's the CEO and founder of Executive on the Go and is widely known as the go-to professional for helping businesses move from vision to execution with clarity and confidence. AnGèle is also sought after speaker, community leader, and advocate for women entrepreneurs, bringing a heads-on, systems-driven approach to sustainable success. Let's welcome back to the sanctuary, AnGèle Cade.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I love the sanctuary. I love the space. I love what you've created.
I am glad you decided to come back. So when we first started talking about bringing you on, I told you I wanted to do a 3-parter because I wanted to talk about starting a business and what it takes, because some people were really lost about what that looks like and what that process was. And you gave us some awesome tips on what that looks like. And now with part 2, we're going to talk about sustaining and growing the business. So this really kind of goes back to some of my own struggles. Like, I'm always super transparent about like I don't have it all figured out, y'all. I've had my little LLC, my Coach Kim LLC for a long time, but that was like a side business, and now this is becoming my real business, how I make my money. So I'm bringing you guys along my journey, but I also want to make sure you guys are like learning as I'm learning on the journey. So, in episode 1, we talked about starting a business the right way. What actually happens after people launch that they don't expect?
So one of the things I think that happens very frequently is they underestimate maintenance, right? So you take up all your energy, you figure out your resources, you're able to execute at the beginning, but then you didn't consider maintenance. You didn't consider bookkeeping, taxes, renewals, like what comes after you've started. And so being able to have a very real conversation, a real understanding, a real plan around what does it take to maintain the structure? What does it take to maintain the business? What does it take to support it beyond inception? And so it's like saying, oh, I wrote this book and I'm gonna have my book signing party, and then nothing else happens after that. So we want to make sure that there's a thought of what happens after you've crossed that initial that initial beginning point.
Listen, I hear launch parties and I get very, very nervous. I will be the first to say, some of my girlfriends, they were like, you should do a launch party. I said, oh, no, 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 no. No, that makes me nervous because I feel like if you launch and then like it goes quiet, like that to me looks worse than having a beautiful party and nothing really to show forth after said party.
Yeah. And this is why a lot of times in business, I say to start with the end. A lot of times people, and you'll hear it a lot, start with the end in mind, right? Beginning, think about where you're going, because if you don't plan for the post, it is like having a launch party, and a launch party or a book signing or any of those things that you do as you're navigating your vision, create accountability, because now you're declaring to the world, I have started this. This is me. I am saying that I'm here to stay. Join me on this journey. So you really have to be clear on what are you doing next.
Well, I get it. And maybe that's why I don't want to declare. I'm not in the declarative mode yet, okay? Because I feel like I'm in the very seedling stage, which is great, right? I have ideas. I'm building and setting up systems. But like, I want to get to that sustain phase. But so many businesses struggle in that sustain phase, even when the idea is solid. Why does that happen?
I mean, I want to say that what I've seen in our experience is that people fail in the sustaining because they are not adjusting with technology. They're not adjusting with the market. They're not adjusting with what's going on in the economy. Like, the reality is that in every economic state, in every market, in every technology, there's a space for what you do. You just might have to change how you do it. A lot of times businesses don't scale because they're not willing to change or grow. They lock into what they do, and then they assume this is the only way to do it. Sometimes you may break the barrier for someone else to discover how to do it better because they're looking at you and you're actually guiding them on what not to do. But because you're not learning for yourself, all of a sudden you're going down a path that becomes implosive. It doesn't create growth.
What recommendations do you give to like people who are trying to sustain, who their heads down, which is understandable because oftentimes when you get into the sustain phase, you might still only be a business of one. So what does that look like in terms of advice to help them get up out of the business and be sure that they're making adjustments according to what's going on around them?
It's the difference between deciding that you've created a job that you're executing in the moment with your head down, with you looking at what was designed and creating and you servicing the clientele that you have in existence, versus being an actual owner, being an investor, being a visionary, being forward thinking in your industry. What does it mean for you to be an industry expert? It's about the hours that you spent. It's about the time that you spent in your craft. For everyone that's listening that has a business, they are taking a chance in a business because they believe they're good at it. They believe they're gifted. They believe it's part of their purpose. They've done the hours, the time. So you do that work, but then all of a sudden you realize one day, oh my gosh, I've just created a job. I've created a job of one. I'm my boss, I'm my employee, and I am clocking in and out every day to this job. I don't have a business. I don't have a system. I don't have duplication. I don't have something that is franchisable. I don't have something that can expand. I don't have something that could be sold or packaged. I don't have some. So they realize all of a sudden when it comes down to navigating the success or failure, that's when the realization comes of what they have or don't have.
So, how do we start that shift from this is a job and now I am an owner, I own the business, I need to think a little bit differently? How does that shift really happen? Like, what can I do? Because I find myself right now, if I'm being super honest, and maybe because this has been a week, I've been working a job this week.
Yeah.
So, how do I start that shift so I'm not every week maybe working a job? I know sometimes I'm going to have to work a job.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think also identifying very soon the areas that need to be delegated, the areas that need to be outsourced, the areas that, so as you begin to make money, I tell clients all the time, when you're making money, are you actually just taking the profits and you're eating it? And so versus reinvesting it. Are you taking your profits and you are surviving with it versus allowing it to be invested into the business itself? So being able to navigate that balance. Most of us, when we're in the business where it's grassroots, we're hitting it, we've got to take it, we've got to survive, we've got to pay rent, we've got to pull out, we've got to withdraw. But what does it look like to then pause and say, you know what, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to navigate taking this loan, or I'm going to navigate, adjusting or figuring out these resources. I'm going to change my budget. The other reason why a failure occurs sometimes in maintenance is because sometimes we take our same habits that we have in our personal life, and we think for some reason that when we have the business that we're not going to adopt the same habits. If you have bad credit personally, what makes you think that you're going to create good business credit?
Ooh.
Because you are the same person making the same decisions. So begin to think about what are the attributes, what are the things that are going on with you personally, and what are you bringing over into the business that needs to be adjusted so that you can then, support its success.
I think that's so interesting because I don't think people think about that their personal attributes and how they maybe show up, especially as an entrepreneur. They look a little bit different. Those personal attributes that you had maybe when you were working your corporate job might work in corporate, but they're not going to work in entrepreneurship. What do you recommend for people who might be struggling from an attribute perspective? How should they kind of handle some of those challenges of shifting or doing behavior shifts around like attributes, especially like credit,
Yeah.
etc.?
I would say the first thing is to be honest with
Mm.
yourself. I think a lot of times people go into business Instagram delusional, right?
Ooh.
TikTok delirious. You think to yourself like, oh, if I just do this, then this is going to happen, while you're still the same operator. You're still the same pilot. This is still your ship. And so you're bringing all of those things that you've, promised and you've shaped and you've thought, I'm not going to do like my parents. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But yet all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you're like, I'm my mother. I don't know how this happened. Like, I saw all these things and I vowed I would never do X, Y, and Z. And here I am. I'm saying and I'm doing those same things. How do we stop those cycles? And so the way that we stop them is, number one, that we're honest that they exist. And then we navigate the resources that we need to help support the changing of them. So I want to say very clearly, as Black women, we cannot be afraid of things like counseling. We cannot be afraid of networking groups, and we cannot be afraid to glean the resources and the things that we are also deserving of. So getting into those spaces that might be uncomfortable initially, but some of the best insight that I got of what to do in my business came from being in rooms and being at tables that I was not invited to sit at. But best believe I was there and I was going to glean everything that they said, and I was going to get everything that there was to offer, and I was going to raise my hand. And every time I contributed, it was almost like storytelling. You know, they would almost watch you as if you were a doll or something. You know, it was just like that whole, you speak so well, you do this, you know, the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is the reality is when you're in the space, you begin to understand why their thinking is different. Their thinking is different. Their expectation is different. And I begin to get, if I walk into certain spaces and I expect differently, or I talk differently, or I stand in my space of what I'm contributing and I realize its value differently, then am I going to get a different response? And all of a sudden I did. It actually happened, but it only happened because I allowed myself to be in these spaces that, again, I wasn't invited to. I didn't even know existed. Some of them I got on by accidentally opened a door and was like, oh, this is what's going on in here. Let me sit right here on this corner and see. And then all of a sudden they look around. Oh, you're here. Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm here. And I guess what? You know what? I realize as you all are talking, I belong here because I also have a business. I also want success. I also want legacy. I also want succession. I also want to be able to move and navigate. And you know what? If the business fails, I want to be able to do like you and start over again the next day with the next new investor and keep going.
And we're going to talk about that next episode about businesses that fail and how to start out over and all that stuff. But you just made, to me, such a valid point. You started going into spaces where you may not have even been invited. When you think about your business timeline, because, you know, we're dealing probably with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs that are like new, trying to figure this out. What month? You had your launch party in January. Okay. What month did you say, all right, let me go start kicking in some doors?
You know, I want to say honestly that I didn't start, I can tell you what I did, right?
Yeah.
So after the first year of what I would call proving profit, right? So the first year is where I prove profitability. After I've proven profitability, then it started to feel like just a job. Then I began to read books because I didn't have access to those people or to those subscriptions or to those plans and all the things that cost $10,000 a month, $30,000 a month. So I began to read books. So then when I read the books, it was wild. I read E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I'll never forget it. And I went to a marketing event for our local chamber. And I actually met someone who was a Michael Gerber, like, licensed coach. And I was like, I just read this book. I said, I'm the pie maker, the washer, the greeter, of all the things in the book. And so we laughed about it. And he was like, you know what? I really like you. I do the coaching. It costs this, but I'm willing to work with you for X. And so at that point, I decided, you know what? Let me invest in this process and system because I really did understand and I really did accept the elements of the book. What does it look like for me to apply it in how I do the business? So that was the first time that I actually invested and gave money to somebody to coach me in something to navigate a process or system. It was Michael Gerber's E-Myth. And so when I did that, it was like my first kind of space of being with someone and something that I didn't quite understand. I didn't know how it was going to go, but I trusted the process. So once I got through that, I would say it was around year 3 when I built the confidence that no matter what was going on or what came across my desk, I said in year 3 I was going to show up. And it was uncomfortable chamber meetings and networking nights and, you know, put your name tag on rooms and all of the things where you walk in and you're the only you in there, but you work the room. And I promised myself that I was going to work every room that I got into. And it wasn't until year 3 that shift happened. And it was that year that my husband was able to quit his job and start working with me full time.
Oh, I love this. So you said a couple of things I think people sleep on. So I used to work for a chamber of commerce. Let's share with the people the benefits of a chamber of commerce, because I think that people still think that's really antiquated, but chamber of commerces are really still great places from a resource perspective for businesses. So maybe you can share with us about chamber of commerces.
So yes, number one, it definitely is a great place to network with other local, small and medium-sized businesses. And also some of the larger corporate businesses as well participate in chambers, whether it's the local banks that want to make a local impression, but they're major corporations. And you begin to realize that a lot of these major entities have distributions or things that they engage with in terms of local businesses, in terms of collaborations, sponsorships, partnerships. The more they see you, this is about relationship. We're still in the business of relationship.
Yes.
You do business with people that you like, with people that you trust. This is why we're not in most deals, because most deals are happening on the golf course. That's why we're not in most deals, because most deals are happening at a bar. That's why we're not in most deals, because most deals are happening across the table at dinner. We're thinking we're hitting the pavement and doing this thing when the major deals are happening because my neighbor told me that my cousin Bob is doing the right, and then that's who's getting the deal.
That part.
And so it's relationship. So the chamber allows you to build relationship. And then the other thing that it does is that there are other entities that are also plugged into chambers, local economic development companies, local, you know what I mean? Like all of these things are in that space that allow you to show up and say, you know what, I am looking for a loan. I am looking for investment. I am looking for a pilot or a space where they're taking a business and they're shaping it, or they're trying to make an example of it. There are spaces where that can happen, and your business is something that can raise your hand. The other place that's really good is, and I think a lot of people sleep on this, is MBA programs. A lot of them have hours that they have to do,
Yep.
and I can't tell you how many amazing, whether it's white paper or even different metrics and things that we've had to measure in our business that have come from being a part of a study of somebody's master's program.
Yeah.
And so those types of things are spaces where you want to constantly be in front of and be in those spaces as well.
So I'm a percentage person, okay, and I'm really trying to get people to wrap their heads around how they should be spending their time as entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
So I will take myself for example. When I think about Kamika, the Coach Cam LLC, which is 4 different businesses, I've shared this with you guys. And I only want to work 4 days a week. I've said this, okay? I don't want to work Friday. I wind up working more like 6 days a week, but it's really, I would say 4.5 days a week is what I really wind up working.
Okay.
But Monday I set aside for All Up Coach Cam LLC, meaning I do everything having to do with on administrative stuff for all the businesses.
Okay.
So underneath the umbrella. So I set aside one day just to deal with that. Okay. And then I still set aside time for learning. Like today I attended a seminar that was sponsored by Verizon for marketing personas. So I actively seek, like, I want to be a continuous learner. So when I was working my corporate job, I would take 10% of my weekday, so my week, and set aside for learning. So that was 4 hours out of the week that I set aside for learning.
Beautiful.
And then, we have to like do sales. We gotta, today it's like it's another day I have to record content, and now content is a big portion, and people tell me like you should really be spending like 10 hours a week on that. And if we're trying to stay with this 40-hour work week, what percentage would you kind of attribute to how entrepreneurs should be spending their time to sustain their business?
So I would say that number, I would aggregate that number based on where you are in the space of entrepreneurism. So for example, the reason why I say that is because entrepreneurs are a different model than necessarily like a business owner or a business investor. So like a serial entrepreneur, and this is the thing, you have to understand, what are you? Like, are you wired a particular way to, you know what I mean? Are you wired to be
What
an
does
investor?
that look like, though? What's a wire? Because people are like, Kamika, you were built to be an entrepreneur. We don't know why you stayed in corporate. What does that wiring look like?
So, you know, I don't know that I'm the expert in even identifying it. I just think I feel it intuitively when I meet somebody and I'm like, oh, they're a serial entrepreneur. Like for me, they're indicators of that. So it's the person who's like, they get kind of bored or tired with the same thing over and over again, or they get extremely stressed and overwhelmed when they're like way down the road on a project and it's still like in the same place, and they're ready to kind of shift, or they get excited, or they're like, oh my gosh, this thing could work. I just need to. Some people are the starters. They're not the finishers. They start it, they need to package it, they need to make it pretty, and they need to sell it. But because they don't know what they are, they're constantly trying to finish something, and maybe they're not finishers. And there's other people, they were wired to finish. They don't have it in them to think of the new thing. But boy, you get them in the middle of that project and they're like, give me that. I can finish it for you. But again, figuring out and getting clarity on like who you are. What are the strengths in your personality? What are the strengths in your competencies? What are your skills? And hone in on that. Stop trying to create tension and go against the thing that you are in your core. I think that's a lot of our problems. We spend so much time fighting with ourselves, this idea of what we think we're supposed to be versus what we actually are. If you would just be what you actually are and figured out the success and the scaling of that, how much success would you experience if you were able to say, you know what, I'm a starter. I see it, I start it, let me see who could take it to the next level, and let me bring them in so they can carry it, and then they just pay me a piece and let me go on to what's next. But we buy in so much, like, I started it, I gotta finish it, and if I don't finish it, then I failed it, and if I fail it, then... Who told you that?
Interesting.
Who told you that? It's a bunch of stories we made up.
So we got our starters, we got our people that'll come in and like run this thing, and then we have some finishers.
Yeah.
So based on, let's start with the starters. How should the starters be spending their time?
So I would say the starters, they spend their time like in discovery, right? Discovering what the thing is to start, like being inspired by what people need. They get the buy-in from people getting excited with them about this journey or thing that they've seen, or that they've heard, or that they're building, or that they're feeding into the people that they're serving. So they start it, they create it, they see the color, they see the image, they see the logo, they see the beginnings of it. They actually are part of that beginning, and they are excited about it. But the moment that energy fizzes, the moment you're no longer excited about waking up to it, you have to check yourself. You've got to take your temperature. You've got to say, okay, why am I no longer excited? Oh, because I've done everything I was supposed to do to create it. Let me see who wants to take it from here. Maybe you were designed. Again, I'm talking about serial entrepreneurs. There are a number of people that out there that start things, they build it to a certain point, and then they sell it, period. And they walk away, and they're not attached to it. They're like, great, I made money just selling this business, selling that business. I tried that one, it didn't work. I tried this one, it didn't work, but I sold this one, it went well. I partnered with this one. I found someone else to run this one.
But AnGèle, I feel like we're talking in theory. How do Black women get to that point?
We have to talk to each other. We have to talk. I have to know what you're up for. We've got to be able to have tables that we create where we can come together and say, this is what I've done. And you and someone else across there is like, oh my gosh, I'm excited about that. That's my love language. I'm passionate about that. And you're like, beautiful. I've started it. I already have the system. I already have the process. It only takes X amount to run. How much you got on it? How much you got on it? Are you ready to do interviews? Are you ready to do? Then all of a sudden you've got a team, because we were open and honest, and we were open to share. I would rather be in partnership with 10 people and each of them yield me, $1,000, $2,000, than I scrunt and struggle and be miserable in trying to make all that money by myself in something that no longer excites me.
Interesting. Because my vision for kind of this Harlem Renaissance, the new Harlem Renaissance that I've talked about, is us as a collective coming together and really shifting our mindset about how we do business. I really think that is why God was like, hey, I'm about to lay off all of y'all, a million of y'all. Y'all need to shift some stuff.
Yeah.
How do we seriously start building our own like good old boys club when it comes to this type of business perspective? Because I think it's really something we definitely don't talk about enough.
And I would say that, you know, to your point, like, how do we? I mean, I really believe it takes someone like you to say, okay, you know what? We're in the sanctuary. There's other spaces where there could be 10 mics. Let me invite 10. Let me invite 8. Let me invite 5 of the most dynamic, you know, different, you know, women that I've engaged with over the last year. And let's sit down and have a conversation. And let's not just have a conversation. Let's create something together. What does it look like to navigate creating something together, something tangible, something sustainable, something that could have legs and feet, something that could grow? What does that look like? And I think those are the real conversations that we need to have, because it can exist. We can partner together. We can develop something together. But are we willing to have that conversation? Do we trust each other enough? Are we willing to invest? You're already investing, just like I'm already investing, just like someone else is already paying somebody to do something. When are we going to be trusting to say, you know what, let's do this together because we will get further?
Look, I don't know when it's going to happen, because that's what I'm trying to do, is build this community where somebody got to trust somebody. We got to be a little bit vulnerable. We got to put ourselves out there, because, yeah, if we keep operating in this isolation, we're never going to get further ahead that we should. But I think my question for you comes back to, how do you protect ownership, authority, and vision in situations like that?
So you know, again, a lot of that comes with it comes with trust, but it also comes with doing the work of the business. So if you have something that's proprietary to you, making sure that that is registered and protected and that it's yours, making sure that if you're coming to the table with an idea or something that could be licensed, again, making sure that all your marks are in place so you're not giving things away. If, again, trust is a factor, but there could be some rules and some clarity before people even step into the space. I've been in spaces with others where there are contract agreements of what you hear, that you don't you don't share, you don't do this, this is our agreement, everybody signs this, everybody's committed to this, and it is understood that when we're in this space together, that it is a safe space and that we're going to honor the work that each other does, because people are being very vulnerable about the things that are issues in their business or things that they're overcoming. And so you walk into the room with clarity of what this is for and what we are doing together. We are here together to solve problems. We're here together to accelerate our business. And if you're not here, if you don't have a business, then there's no reason for you to be here. And if you're not in the business of it being accelerated, then there's no reason for you to be here. If you also aren't vulnerable and have something to offer, then there's no reason for you to be here at this table. But what does it look like for those that do to show up and actually commit to each other in that way?
I look at it as, don't come in here if you're not trying to solve the problem, but like point out what all the problems are. Because we are very, and I try not to speak in these generalities, but I've been in so many rooms with people where they're quick to point out, that's not going to work. Or, why are you doing it this way, from a negative perspective, but have nothing in terms of, you should do it a different way. Here's how I would do it. It's all about, well, that doesn't look right. Or that doesn't, how can individuals who are like that start shifting away from that?
So this is where, when you have an agreement, when you begin to create these spaces, you have agreements where you get in front of that language. When we comment on each other's work, this is the language that we use, and being able to make sure that those rules are clear and in place before you even begin. We do, networking. We have environments that we've created that do that. And what I've learned is that when you set those rules up front, and when someone does it, you call them out and you catch it in the moment. Oh no, we don't talk like that in here. You make it an agreement with everybody. So that way up front, you create the environment that's needed and conducive for growth and support so that we can get through this together and not walk away and feel, targeted or belittled in any way. So
yeah, I know the conversation has went off a little bit from what I originally had planned. I had like this whole thing like, let's talk about people, partnerships, and power. Let's talk about longevity and exit. But I think this is super important that we are having this conversation because oftentimes when we think of sustainability, we're thinking of how I can do it. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying. Is it a job or is it a business? But I think that the shift of new business owners has to be more communal.
yes.
It has to be more communal. If you were to walk somebody comes to you, and I asked this question before, and they say, "Hey, I want to start a business." You help them with the setup, okay? And now they're looking for you, almost like a business coach, which I recommend people get business coaches. I help some folks with business coaching. I'm actually looking for me a new business coach, but like now they're at the end of year one.
Yes.
What are we telling them to do?
So if you have a year one behind you, that means you have metrics. That means you have data. That means you have financials. That means you've got enough bookkeeping. You've got enough things that can actually give us the insight of what to decide next. And the possibilities as a new business owner, maybe you don't know how to read it. Maybe you don't know how to interpret it. So this is the time after a full year one when you get into it. We're in March right now. Everyone should be dissecting their 2025 numbers in terms of their tax return and what does that look like and what adjustments to make and what things to shift or where they were losing money or where they were getting, all of these things. It's all feedback. It's all insight. It's all metrics. And what are you doing with it? So after a complete year one, it's time to go back to that data and make sure that you're reading it to make the next decisions.
If you could recommend one tool for the year one person that they have to have in their toolkit, what would that tool be in order to sustain and keep their business going?
I would say that after year one, this is where you made it through year one.
Yeah.
If you made it through year one, I would say at this point, depending on the amount of money that you've made, you either need to start to look for a good bookkeeper and a good accounting firm. And I would say, and I say it in that order because sometimes we rush into getting an accounting firm and the cost is high and it's a deterrent from you really digging into the numbers. And maybe in the first phase, you just need a really good bookkeeper to be in sync with you so that you can move away from doing all of the data entry and reconciling. And now you can do more of the management and reviewing of that financial data. So I would say after you do a year one, starting to build your teams, right? You've got your financial teams, your bookkeeper, your accountant. You're starting to think about, okay, the more people that you're exposed to, the more people you engage with, you want to have legal, and even if you don't retain an attorney, you want to start to talk to attorneys. Do you know a good business attorney? Somebody that you could call if something happens? Do you know somebody who can, the more people, we've serviced over 20,000 clients. I tell people, if you haven't been sued, you haven't done enough business because at some point you're going to piss somebody off and somebody's going to be upset.
Oh,
and so nobody wants to get sued, but it's inevitable. It's the environment that we're in. So there's going to be some type of legal dispute. And so for me, 25 years in business, so many clients, there's been some legal disputes, and I'm thankful that I've been victorious in them, but it's still something that we went through. And one of my mentors had told me that. He was like, I was early on, I'm early on, I was maybe about 5-7 years in the business. And he was like, if you haven't been, you're not doing enough. You're not risking enough. You're not out there enough. There's not enough transactions. And I was like, what? He was like, you haven't, somebody hasn't been upset. That means what are you doing? And I was like, I'm trying not to upset anybody. But he's like, I'm listening to him because I'm at that point, I'm making hundreds of thousands. He's making millions. So it's who you're listening to.
Interesting. You said two things I want to touch on. One, is there a monetary threshold for us to start getting bookkeepers accounting? Like, is there a number of like a certain revenue number you hit that you feel like you should maybe get an accountant?
Yeah, I would say, well, you need an accountant to do your actual tax return.
Yeah, of course.
But as far as retaining an accountant, I would say that definitely retaining an accountant when you start going into like when you have like regular, when you're over, 5 digits regularly. So when you're like, hey, I'm doing, I'm doing, 10, 20, 30, $50,000. Like you're going to like that at that point, consider retaining an accounting firm, and they might assign you to a bookkeeper. Cause again, you're really small, but at least you're in the environment with an accountant. Now, bookkeeping, I would say when you start to get north of 40,000, bring in a bookkeeper, because you could have a bookkeeper who could just do your stuff quarterly. It doesn't have to be every month if it's not a lot of volume, but it's good to have the checks and balances. It's good to have the reconciliation. It's good to have somebody who understands the language of a chart of accounts, because this is how you're going to read the success or failure of your business. This is how you're going to predict, oh, if I keep going this way, I only have 18 months left in this business. That's how you're going to be able to read it, where it doesn't feel like failure snuck up on you, because the numbers, I always tell people, numbers don't lie, people do. So this is why you want to be able to read those things.
I love that advice, because I think that sometimes we overlook those two very important things. But you also said something that I gotta pick at. We're too nice. We want to make sure we keep everyone happy so that no one sues us. How can we as Black women be quote unquote nice? And I'm gonna use that very much in quotes. Because I don't want to upset anyone in my business. How do we like get past this whole being nice to I got to make this money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing is that the distinction between what it means to make money versus what it means to be nice. I mean, the reality is that when I think about our counterparts, those two things don't necessarily even exist on the same field. But why for us is it this rule that the moment we interject something that isn't nice, then it defers to our attitude or our this or our that, right? It defers to something negative. And the reality is that those are constructs that weren't designed by us. And so if we're going to create something different, then we have to create new constructs when it comes to that. For years, I'll be honest with you, for years, I refused to be in any of the marketing for the business. Executive on the Go is a really clean, neutral name. Our office our first office, so polished. It looked like a law firm when you came in. People would come in and they would ask for the owner, and I would look around as if it wasn't me, because I didn't want to lose money, because I cannot tell you how many times somebody would call on the phone, they would speak to AnGèle, and then they would schedule an appointment, and then I would show up and I would lose the deal, or I would lose the contract, or I would lose the business because I didn't match what they thought I was. And so there was a constant butting up against this idea that I wasn't what people wanted me to be in the business. And it's really, one day I thought about it, and it was really hard for me, because I want to make the money. I didn't want that to be in the way. If I'm on the phone and you don't know what I am because I do the voice or whatever, and I'm on the phone and you don't know what I am, and we execute a deal, and the moment I show up, or the moment you see that I'm Black, or the moment something else happens, or you come to the office, now you have an issue. Now something is wrong. Now I can't have the business, because now I'm dealing with firms, because we white label for firms, accounting firms, attorney firms. So I need to get these bigger deals. Like my one-off clients is a portion of my business, but a larger portion, a steady portion, is our white label to these major firms. And we weren't getting it, because when we show up, we're Black. So what do we do? What do we do?
I don't know, girl. What do we do? What's the answer? Because I'm thinking like all money, not good money, but I know like that's not realistic. We're talking about big money, right? It's not like, oh, this is like $10,000. No, we're talking six-digit deals.
Yeah.
So what do you do? I think that's a great question when we were trying to figure out, because I kind of I'm kind of dealing with that myself, because I'm setting up the consulting
Yes.
portion, and I want to go after these government contracts, and I want to be able to still have my name out there. But is there a way for me to neutrally, like, because we know what we're dealing with this administration, right? Is should I shrink myself? Do I show up not as my authentic self in order to get money?
I think that's a question that we all have to ask ourselves at some point during the course of our business, because we come up, in some way, all of us are faced with this very same question. And so for me, what I had to do was I had to reconcile, I had to really dig down and dig deep in myself and trust that I was going to get the business that was going to be mine if I show up as my authentic self. Shrinking, disappearing, making all of our avatars white no longer served the bigger picture of what I was up for. I wanted to stand alongside the business. I want to show up to the conference. I'm going to show up to the space. And the reality was, again, I had to reconcile with myself. What does it mean for the success or future of my business? Was it going to be enough, or was I going to lose so much that I wasn't going to be able to sustain what was needed for my family? And it was a risk that I had to take. And what I did was I began to lean into it. I stopped rejecting it and I leaned into it. I made it a part of not only who I was, but how I was standing and how I was making a difference and who I was taking with me and what that was about and who else I hired and what else I looked for and all of the things connected to it. And once I did that, then it no longer made a difference for us in what we were considering our bottom line. But it took, I want to say, at least, if not maybe 2 years for us to struggle through that, because it impacted the business so much at the time.
If you could share with a business owner, a Black business owner who might be struggling with that, what would you tell them to do instead to avoid that 2-year struggle?
Yeah.
We're trying to accelerate.
Absolutely. Learn from all the mistakes. I would say to lean into your superpower, your gifting. One of the things that I realized, what it was like, I started to do more speaking events. I started to go out more. I started to become the face more of the business. And one of the things that I realized was that when I was authentic in that space and I went out on those platforms, that people were gravitating and people were attracted to me because of who I was and what I was saying. And there was nothing that had to be apologetic about it. There was nothing that had to shrink about it, but I had to be willing to lean into it. So I would say to any business owner that's listening, lean into your voice, lean into your superpower, lean into the part of you that no matter what, if somebody closes their eyes and they listen and they taste or they experience everything that you have to offer, they are connected to the excellence that is you, and let them feel that.
I think that's long-term sustainability. That's the plan. Like, if you aren't able to show up as your authentic self in your own business, why are you here? Like, I feel like the whole reason why we're exiting corporate America is because they don't take our authenticity and look at it as a superpower. So I love that shift that you're telling people to think about their superpower and lean into it. So as we wrap up this episode of sustainability and keeping the business going, is there something that I should have asked or something that you want to share with the audience around sustaining, building, and growing?
I would say what was beautiful, sustaining, building, and growing, is that what's beautiful in that concept is when you are scaling your business, when you are growing your business, really begin to open up to partnerships, open up to licensing, open up to things that you didn't even think was possible for you. Think bigger. And I want to also tell you, get into spaces where people are doing things that you never even heard of. Like, get into the room with a venture capitalist. Listen to a venture capitalist pitch. Think about what it means to get big dollars to be the engine for the thing that you're doing. Like, you have access to those things. They're for you in the sense that why should you not put your hat in the ring? Why should you not be one of the people on the list that's possible to be able to glean the benefit from those things? So I'd love for you to get into those spaces, have those conversations. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to open up your mind and open up the possibility of what you can have access to. If you ever thought about franchising, let's say you've got a really great idea or a great model for your business and someone else told you maybe you should consider franchising and you're like afraid of it. Don't start from scratch. There's thousands of franchises out there. Click on their link. See what it takes to apply. See what their agreements look like. See what their onboarding looks like. Begin to think about it and then shape it for what you want to create for yourself. There's no reason to reinvent anything. Begin to learn and glean from what others have done so that you can shorten that runway and access those things quicker. So I would just say, just make sure that you are opening up to everything that's available that exists.
I love it. Once again, tell the people where they can find you.
They can find me, AnGèle Cade, at execonthego.com. Again, that's execonthego.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at jellybox. At Instagram.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for part 2 of this series. Oh gosh, this is so good. I'm really, really enjoying our time together. So part 3 will be about closing, transition, changing, making the decisions about the business that look very different from what you were making when you first started the business. So thanks, AnGèle, for coming to the sanctuary again.
So excited. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right, y'all. So let's wrap up this week's episode with our SAVE strategy. This week, we're flipping the E from elevate to equipped. Being equipped doesn't mean having all the systems. It means having the right systems for the stage you're in. Equipping yourself looks like business building in phases, not piles, choosing systems that support revenue and capacity first, letting structure catch up to growth intentionally, resisting the urge to over-optimize before you stabilize. Equipment is about readiness. Equipment is about readiness. It's not about perfection. And that is this week's SAVE strategy. Like, subscribe, follow Black Women Will Save Black Women wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Black Women Will Save Black Women on all social media platforms. Follow me, Kamika T. Dillard, on Instagram and Miss KT Dillard on TikTok. Please visit blackwomenwillsaveblackwomen.com for our merch line. Our merch is up. As always, support, amplify, validate, elevate. That is how we save each other. And never forget, Black Women Will Save Black Women. I'm your host, Kamika Dillard. See you guys next week.